I'm going to hear a couple more speeches now, and first of all, we're going to hear from one of Greg's PhD students, one of Greg's PhD graduates, John Decker, and then how do you choose which of your children to give Christmas presents to when you've got so many? So out of all the students that the Old Testament lecturer has taught, who better to speak on behalf of all the students that he's taught than Moses himself? So Moses, he's going to come, and after Johnson, Moses is going to press because thanks Moses. Just let you know, I'll introduce Moses now before we start. Moses was a student here at Christ College many years ago, and Moses is currently the minister at Castlefield Presbyterian Church. And Moses, thanks for speaking tonight, but after John finishes. Thanks, mate.
Well, on behalf of all the students and graduates who have been taught and educated by Greg, I'm standing here. That's amazing. Greg and I have been friends for over 30 years, ever since my first year at PTC in 1991. That's really 35 years ago. But it's just been good. We're not that close. Sometimes we don't talk to each other for over 2 years. That's not a good friendship. So I was wondering why Greg gave me an opportunity to speak at his farewell tonight. Well, in 1999, when I was licensed to preach, I asked the presbytery to appoint Greg Goswell to preach at my licensing service. And that was unusual because normally, the presbytery would appoint a minister to preach. But the presbytery accepted my offer, and Greg accepted my offer, and he came all the way from Campbelltown to Ashfield Presbyterian Church to preach at my licensing service. I think Greg is doing the same thing now, giving me something in return. And I'm very honored to do this tonight. I want to share with you my experience with Greg. That shows what kind of person he is. Firstly, Greg is a scholar. I have already mentioned, but we all know he is a scholar. We all know that he is very intelligent, smart, well-educated, sophisticated. And all Christ College students have been privileged to learn from his knowledge and insight. One thing I'd like to point out tonight is that Greg is not only a genius, you like that term? but also a hard worker. He never wastes any time. During my college years in the 90s, I often saw how he used his time during his breaks. Between lectures, after morning tea, after lunch, those 5 or 10 minutes, he would be in the corner of the library, memorizing the vocabularies of Syriac and Arabic. Who would want to do that? We just want to have a coffee and chat with your friends. It's just free. But I always admired Greg. He used his time. I can't do that. But even during those short breaks of 5 or 10 minutes, to do something useful. Another thing he's done nearly all his life is that in his personal devotion, he has worked through every single verse of the biblical book. and researched deeply, not relying on a commentary or two, but he looked up all the theological journal articles, monographs which I've never heard of, theses, and made his own exegetical notes. They are worth much more than commentaries. And his Bible study notes, sermons, and lecture notes reflect the devotional research. That's amazing. And that's I've been trying to do. But it's tough. But at least I tried. These kinds of things, just little things, have made Greg a special man. Greg is a scholar. Secondly, Greg is a preacher. About 25 years ago, my family visited his congregation in Cambridge. And he preached on the first chapter of the book of Revelation, that the risen Christ preached to the seven spirits in Asia Minor. When he preached, his facial expression, tone, and his gesture, they were all different. The way he expounded and explained the Word of God, the way he delivered with passion and conviction. It was like the logic on fire, the terms that describe the Martin Longers. Those of you who have heard Greg preaching to his congregation would agree with me. When he preached to the congregation, he was different. He's a different guy. He's not the same guy I saw at the college. On that day, I saw Greg preaching to the congregation. I was inspired to adopt this as my own style of preaching. And that's what I've been doing in the last 25 years. So Greg is a scholar, and Greg is a preacher, and Greg is a pastor. And he has a relation. I believe all those here for this special occasion know how warm and loving and gracious Greg is. He may look cold at first, but he is in opposite. He didn't even smile at me during the first 3 years in the college. and you mentioned that the kid's humor. I don't agree with that. But whenever I went through difficult times and hardships, and whenever I needed encouragement, comfort, and advice, Greg was always there. Not just me, but many other students have said the same. He is a natural mentor, and he's a natural counselor, because he listens to your problems, and he gives you wise answers. Back in 1995, I was hitting rock bottom, physically and psychologically. I felt 3 stories at work. I couldn't continue to study at BTC. And I had to come back later. And Greg didn't know me well personally back then. And one of the students, who happened to be Greg's church member, she told me that Greg said to her, "I like students like Moses. He's special." Not sure if she passed on correctly what Greg said. And Greg may not remember what he said. After all, that was 30 years ago. But that was a moment that changed my life. The man I admired and respected spoke highly of me behind the scene. That was something. Yes, God saved me, by His grace. But Greg changed my life. As I close my speech, I recall one day at PTC about 20 years ago that there was an ad hoc discussion group called FROG that stands for Fully Reliant Goldsworthy. And Graham Goldsworthy, of course we all know Graham Goldsworthy, is a well-known Australian biblical scholar. At the risk of oversimplification, Goldsworthy emphasized using the Old Testament to preach Jesus Christ. On the other hand, Greg said that the Old Testament is there not just to be used to preach Christ, and the Old Testament itself is the Word of God. And the Old Testament needs to be read and preached that way, not necessarily to be used to preach Christ. He helped all students and lecturers in that room open their eyes to look at the Old Testament as it is. He helped us see FROG in another way. Fully rely on God. Well, today is a special night. We may rephrase it. Fully rely on Goswell. Just tonight. They are all frogs. Greg, you have been in this ministry for about 40 years. And the number 40 is a special in the Bible. I don't think this is the end of your ministry, but the beginning of a new chapter. Focusing on writing books, Lord willing, for the next 14 years. For that, may God continue to bless you and your ministries and your family. Thank you, my friend.
In the tradition of Frog, you may think you know everything there is to know about biblical theology because you've read a book on biblical theology. But of course, there's now a defined book on biblical theology.